It's 30 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. here in Kampala, Uganda, where it's quite bright and sunny on this beautiful Tuesday morning, the 13th of January 2026. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. And that means it's 1 day left for Uganda to go to the polls. The reason that's why I keep needing to remind you of that is because that eventful day, the 15th of the Thursday, 15th of January, could mean that we may not be able to do a morning broadcast. I do suspect grossly or highly or anticipate highly that there could be an internet shutdown, that there will be an internet shutdown. It's become the modus operandi for many governments here in Africa when it comes to polling days. So yeah, there's that expectation that internet could be off, and when it goes off, obviously we will be unable to join you for our usual conversations. But it is what it is. We have no control over that as a football tribe. We can only hope that that perhaps that won't be the case, or that if that is going to be the case, that it will be short-lived, that it will be a short-lived nightmare for us to go through. As sad or as unfortunate as that may sound. But anyways, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you did enjoy the action from last night. Particularly, I was following the game between Liverpool and Barnsley. Liverpool beat Barnsley by 4-1. Hugo Ekitike coming off the bench to score a brace in that game. Dominic Szoboszlai, scored in that game as well as Jeremy Frimpong for Liverpool, but he turned out to be a bit of a villain. That's for Dominic Szoboszlai for a moment in that game because he gifted Barnsley what turned out to be their only goal in that game. So with all that said, allow me, and get into the conversation. This morning, we'll continue to discuss the managerial changes that have happened during the month of January. There's an increasing expectation that in the next 12 hours, perhaps 24 hours, Manchester United will officially announce their interim manager, who is expected to be their former midfielder, Michael Carrick. Remember, he joined them from Tottenham Hotspur and went on to have a stellar career under the charges of Sir Alex Ferguson. They won many Premier League titles there. And when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked, I think sometime in 2022, or thereabout, it was Michael Carrick who took over the reins as an interim before Ralph Rangnick came in, So yeah, it's quite interesting to see what's going on over there at Old Trafford, and we'll be discussing that. So like I said, there's an expectation that Michael Carrick will be given the role, and in the wake of that very fact, it's being reported that Wayne Rooney would love to be a part of his backroom staff. Now, I do not know how many people have gone on to be managers on their own or head coaches, and then in a twist of events, went back to being assistants. Now, it wouldn't be unique to Wayne Rooney. It's happened before. Pep Linders, I think, had the stint with Red Bull, and now is the assistant to Pep Guardiola. We know Kolo Touré went and had a stint with Wigan Athletic and is now under Pep Guardiola as part of his coaching staff or backroom staff. So, those things happen. We know, I think, was it Mike Phelan? Did he have a similar incident? I stand to be corrected on Mike Phelan because for a good chunk of time he was an assistant to Sir Alex Ferguson. But all that can happen. So where do we start it all? Let's I think start with that game between Liverpool. I mean, expectedly, Liverpool were dominant in that game. And it's no surprise that they won the fixture by the kind of scoreline that they did win it with. For me, I think it was always bound to be an easy game for Liverpool, bearing in mind that they were playing at home. You're at Anfield. You've started with your big stars, Georgi Mamadashvili in goal. Virgil van Dijk was in there. the third goal was scored by Florian Wirtz, not Hugo Ekitike. It's Hugo Ekitike who provided the assist. But anyways, you had Joe Gomez in there, Andy Robertson, Jeremy Frimpong, Alexis McAllister, Soboslai, Federico Chiesa, Curtis Jones, Ruyongo Mohawk, and Cody Gakpo. Now, that's as elite as a Liverpool team can be. I mean, of course, you could say that Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike, Florian Wirtz did not start, Ibrahim Konate, but that's just, the squad depth of Liverpool and the kind of talent that they do have. Because if you come up against Barnsley and you're fielding Virgil van Dijk and you're fielding Andy Robertson, a two-time, Premier League winner, Jeremy Frimpong, a 35 million euro player, McAllister and Soboslai in that midfield, Chiesa with all his experience, as well as Cody Gakpo. I mean, that's the best there is for Liverpool, really. So, in the absence of Mo Salah, so it was a very, very elite team to have. Barnsley tried to give us a semblance of competition, and to say that they did not compete would be would be in a way to despise what they were able to do, because at least they had 4 shots on target in that game. Ordinarily, you wouldn't expect that. Really, Liverpool had 7 on target, but Dominic Szoboszlai with a stunning strike in the ninth minute, gave Liverpool the lead with McAllister providing the assist. Barnsley players were caught ball watching from the outside of the area before Szoboszlai took it. He almost felt like a set piece as he fired that ball into the back of the net for that beautiful goal. And then Jeremy Frimpong in the 36th minute, once again Alexis McAllister providing the assist, danced his way past a couple of defenders into the box before firing that ball into the roof of the net. And it was 2-0. And then Dominic Szoboszlai went on an athletic ball recovery, and he recovers the ball well. He's in full control of the ball, and then he decides to be smart to try and play a dink back to Georgi Mamadashvili. Unfortunately for him, he could not get the ball under his feet and simply slid it into the path of Phillips, who scored to make it 2-1, which was the result at halftime. And then for the better part of the second half, Barnsley remained in the game. They tried to fight for it. They just could not find the breakthrough. Rain Veins says hi. Hi, Rain Veins. Good morning. Where are you joining us from, Rain Veins? So, like I said, in the 84th minute, Florian Wirtz squad to provide the assist. Squad to make it 3-1 for Liverpool, with Hugo Ekitike, second half substitute, providing the assist, while Ekitike himself decided to say, I should be on this score sheet. And in the 4th minute of added time, that's when he rose to the occasion to score to make it 4-1, with Florian Wirtz providing the assist in that sort of incredible performance for Liverpool. Rain Vein says, I'm from Uganda, Bushenyi. How are you doing? I'm doing fine. I'm from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much for joining us, Rain Veins. I hope you're doing okay. How is Bushenyi? Bushenyi, beautiful place to be. I've ever been to Bushenyi, but merely for a stopover, and this was many years ago. I think it was around 2003. Yeah, possibly. There's a beautiful primary school in Bushenyi where we had a stopover. But anyways, Rain, thank you so much for joining us. What team do you support in case you support any team? So yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, it was expected to be a routine victory for Liverpool. You are up against Barnsley. It's a cup competition. Yes, cup competitions come with their own surprises, but how low would Liverpool's season sink should they have lost, this game? So for me, the expectation was that they would win, and that beautiful goal from Jeremy Frimpong was quite sublime, really, to watch. Rain says he's an Arsenal fan. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Reigns is an Arsenal fan. I'm a football fan first. For me, that's where my loyalty lies with football. But I do pay allegiance to Arsenal, Real Madrid, and the Uganda Cranes. Of course, with the Brazil national team. Even though I've had debates with Pedri, a usual suspect on this channel, who says I cannot support more than one team when it comes to club football. Well, I can, but yeah. So I mean, Liverpool could have scored more in that game if they would have been clinical, but that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case, you know. But because I think it was Virgil van Dijk who forced the Barnsley goalkeeper into a brilliant save, and then that cheeky assist from Ektike to Florian Wirtz. I think he's now scored what, 2 or 3 goals at least for Florian Wirtz, for a player whose statistics this season were not so much on his side for the start of the season. I think it's safe to say that he started to find a bit of his footing. Yeah, he has 3 goals to his name. He has 2 in the Premier League now. In 20 games, he has a goal in the FA Cup, and then he has 2 assists in the UEFA Champions League. You remember Liverpool's 5-1 win against Eintracht Frankfurt. That's when he provided those 2 assists. He has 1 assist in the Premier League, and then 1 assist in the FA Cup. Of course, by measure of his standards and the price tag that was slapped onto his name when he was leaving Bayer Leverkusen to join Liverpool, you'd say he's still wanting in numbers, but I'd say give him time. Give him time. Unfortunately, time is not something that comes cheap in modern football today, because while we are at it here, only this month alone, about they've been 4. Is it 4 or 5? About 4 or 5, 5 significant managerial changes across world football. It all began. They've been 4. Sorry, they've been 4, not 5. Chelsea on the 1st of January part ways with Enzo Maresca. Jan 5th, Manchester United part ways with Ruben Amorim. Celtic part with their manager before replacing him with Martin O'Neill, and then Real Madrid yesterday part ways with Xabi Alonso. A topic that we did discuss at full exhaustion yesterday in last night's broadcast. For those of you that missed that edition, you can go over to the channel under the live section. You'll see that broadcast that we did last night, in which we discussed that managerial change for Real Madrid, which I for one did not agree with as a Real Madrid fan, but also as a sports a pundit or commentator or enthusiast or fan, whichever way you want to describe me, or whatever title you may want to slap on my name. Not that I would need any, but it's a decision that I did not agree with. In fact, besides the Celtic decision, all the other 3 decisions I've not agreed with. Not with the parting ways of Chelsea with Enzo Maresca. Never agreed with that one. I did not see eye to eye with Man United on the Ruben Amorim decision. Not that my opinion with those respective clubs matters, but in the view or in the context within which things happened, and for the benefit of the fans that, the football fans who follow Football Tribe, I do owe them that, So, and then Xabi Alonso is the last suspect. For Ruben Amorim and Xabi Alonso, one would argue they've not won anything. For Enzo Maresca, he won the UEFA Conference League and the FIFA Club World Cup. Now, this season, only 31 games in charge, 22 victories, 5 defeats and 4 draws for Xabi Alonso, and he's been shown the exit. Why? Because they lost to Barcelona 3-2 in the Super Cup final. Again, not the result that would get a manager sacked. Apparently, we are getting rumors that Real Madrid had planned, or Florentino Perez had planned to sack Xabi Alonso had Real Madrid gone out of the UEFA Champions League at the playoff stages. Now, I do not think they are immune to that ejection. I do not think they are immune to that ejection, but for me, the question again would be, what are the circumstances? Unfortunately for Xabi Alonso, he's had to work with a group of players who either do not trust him or do not believe in him or think he's being too hard on them. Now, remember, he's met a group of players who have been used to the lackluster kind of environment of Carlo Ancelotti. I call it lackluster, not because it's a bad environment, because that's how Carlo Ancelotti goes about his business. He treats our players like his sons. He likes to go with that fatherly sort of handling of players. He's a bit of a soft guy. He talks to people with a lot of respect. I do not think he has one too many rules. For him, it's about that. Even when you saw him get frustrated or angry with the antics of Vinicius Junior, he still had that self-restraint as a manager, as not just as a head coach, but as a manager, but also as a mature person in the father figure form of it, for whatever it is, for the metaphor that is, but also he does embody that. So he has that quite the temperament that he has that calmness to him, even in the midst of a storm, that with which he handled affairs at Real Madrid. Now, to reasonable success, he was successful in his second stint with the club, but also it's his lack of success in his final season that got him, to part ways with the club, even though he still had a year left to his then contract. So Xabi Alonso, as a young manager, walks into that dressing room, and he's the sharp contrast of who Carlo Ancelotti was in terms of managerial structure or style. Why? Because modern day managers, at least majority of them, have this, and I do not know who started it particularly, but to the best of my knowledge, in quick reflection, I'd make reference to Pep Guardiola. They have that sort of kind of player policing. You know how prisons work? Allow me to use the example of prisons or servicemen, men in uniform. If it's an order, it's an order. There's no sideways to it. There's no this, there's no I think that. No. Rules are rules. You ought to follow them. So modern day managers have that element to them of the structure of a serviceman, or like the structure of the army or prison, where an order is an order. So they set a certain set of rules for which you are expected to abide by. We know that Mikel Arteta is that kind of manager. The reason that's why he part ways with players like Matteo Guendouzi and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was because particularly they did not toe the line in terms of following his rules to the T. They were sometimes late for training. He did not like that. He does not want a disjointed group where, some players think they can do anything and get away with it. Same applies to Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. Enzo Maresca implemented the same style. Vincent Kompany is the same mold of a manager, and by extension, Xabi Alonso. Now, it's no surprise that all the people that I've highlighted have worked with Pep Guardiola at one point. For Xabi Alonso, he worked with as a player, senior player. He worked with Pep Guardiola at Bayern Munich. Vincent Kompany was Manchester City captain, and so by that he worked with Guardiola. Enzo Maresca is an apprentice of Guardiola, and so is Mikel Arteta. So, by the example of those managers, it shows you the point that I'm trying to drive home of how they are sticklers to the rules. They want players to live within a certain model, to have a certain structure. If training is at 8 a.m., you're not expected to arrive at 8:01. If breakfast is at 10:03, you're not expected to arrive at 10:05. No, you ought to have that respect for the team and for everybody else that by following those rules. So Xabi Alonso walks into that Real Madrid dressing room with the same sort of mentality, with the same principles, with the same rules. And he walks into a dressing room that has a cohort of players who think they are the stars of world football, even though they've not won, none of them has won the Ballon d'Or. But they think they are Ballon d'Or material. They think they are that big. And yes, they are big players with their big brands. And he's trying to cow them into a certain structure and in a certain line of direction. And that I would say that was to little success. Players like Kylian Mbappe, players like Vinicius Junior, um, players like Rodrigo Goes, Judy Bellingham, and I'm not saying that they were all indisciplined or did not follow his rules, but we could never hear enough of the bickerings that were coming out of that dressing room about Xabi Alonso and Vinicius Junior. Apparently, they were overtraining, too much structure. Like I said, these modern day managers are about structure. They want you to play a certain way. They want to control as many aspects of the game as they can. So, and again, we've had this discussion before, and good enough, Francesco Sola Fabregas, the manager or head coach at Como, where he's the manager but also part owner of the club, does agree that today players are overly coached. They're told everything that they need to do on the pitch, and that is killing their creativity. And I'm not saying Xabi Alonso's coaching style killed the creativity of, or the ingenuity or the brilliance of Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Junior, but they did not appreciate that sort of style. You know, Africa will never unite. Alonso is a good coach. Mbappe is a problem. That's Africa will never unite. That's what he's saying. Now, I would want to. There's an incident that has been highlighted in the aftermath of Real Madrid's loss to Barcelona in the Super Cup final, losing by 3-2. Vinicius Junior and Gonzalo Garcia scoring for Real Madrid, which at the time were both equalizers, after Rafinha and Robert Lewandowski at different intervals had fired Barcelona into the lead, and subsequently Rafinha getting his second of the night that turned out to be a match winner. He appeared at the end of that game as losers of the game. There was an expectation that they would afford Barcelona a guard of honor, and as a show or sign of respect or sportsmanship, Xabi Alonso had seemed to suggest that they should put their egos and rivalry to sort of park it on the side briefly and give Barcelona or accord Barcelona a guard of honor. Now, again, this highlights what I've been trying to allude to, because some players did not see that they needed to do that, or they felt they did not want to do that, and Kylian Mbappe appeared to lead that brigade to walk away, and subsequently he caused all the other players to walk away with him, not to give Barcelona a guard of honor. And eventually you see Xabi Alonso walk away because it did feel like the players were listening more to Kylian Mbappe than possibly they would have followed their manager. And that in itself was an issue. You know, one could, it's justifiable if you're Kylian Mbappe, and for the sense of objectivity, we can justify it, because at the end of the day, players in a dressing room, they need leadership from fellow players. And for them, maybe they did not see the need of being further humiliated following the defeat to accord Barcelona a guard of honor. But what does that say about the manager's leadership? If the manager says you do A, and then a player, regardless of their status in the dressing room, says let's do B, and players follow the player, where does that leave the manager or the head coach? Trust me, it's not a good place, you know. And Africa says Mbappe was a problem at PSG. Now it's Real Madrid. He adds on to say, I do not see Madrid winning trophies anytime soon with those egos. It pains me to read that or to hear that as a Real Madrid fan, but I sort of understand where you're coming from and why you're alluding to that. Again, last night, when we were speaking about managers, we spoke about Kylian Mbappe, of how Luis Enrique, we're talking about some of the figures that Florentino Perez would be okay parting ways with, should it have come to that. And we highlighted Vinicius Junior and Rodrigo Goes. And we said that the only reservation will be maybe on Judy Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe. And the reason as to why I said that, I did say, for example, we made reference to PSG, while Luis Enrique had no problem parting ways with Kylian Mbappe, as good as a player he is. And whereas he was the star of the player, you can see that the PSG team that went on to win all the goodies or the major honors last season did not have that star man in the team. When you look right from the goalkeeper, who at the time was Gianluigi Donnarumma, up to the last man was Ousmane Dembele, oftentimes, you could hardly point out to a single player to say this one is the star of the team, because it was a collective contribution. Whether it was Akraf Hakimi at right back, whether it was Nuno Mendes at at left back, whether it was Willian Pacho and Marquinhos in centre back, whether it was Vitinha or Joao Neves or Fabian Ruiz, whether it was Desile Doué, a Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, a Bradley Bacola, a Seni Mayuru, a Lee Kang in, a Goncalo Ramos, all of them simply did their job. There's no player you point out to and say, yeah, that's the star of the team. So Luis Enrique got rid of him in a way, and he went with what he believed would work for him, and it worked out for him. Now, Xabi Alonso comes into that dressing room hoping to tame some of these egos. Why? Because he wants the team to play as a collective. And just to drift a little bit back to PSG, tactically, Luis Enrique was concerned with Kylian Mbappe's lack of press. Or, again, he was accustomed to being the star of the team, that the ball gets carried to him. And if he loses it, he does not feel obligated to fight for that ball back. And that's never going to slide with modern day managers. You may get away with it in a game or two, but for the grand scheme of things in the overall structure, you're not going to get away with that. So, similarly, players like Vinicius Junior, Kylian Mbappe, these are players that have been told to lead the counter press. And it's not to say they are not good at it. They just don't want to do it. They are more accustomed or more tailored to the traditional game. It's not to say that they won't press entirely, but they want to do it when they choose to do it. You get the point. So they are more or less accustomed to the traditional way of playing, where midfielders and defenders fight for that ball back and then carry it to the attackers, So whichever manager comes in at Real Madrid, head coach, they're going to have to deal with the same problems that Xabi Alonso had to deal with. And for as long as Real Madrid wants a young manager, that's not a problem they're going to solve anytime soon. Why? Because of egos. You have a player who earns more than you. You have a player who thinks they are better than you or better than you ever were at the game itself. You have players who think they know better. You have players who are not going to respect you. And for as long as players do not respect you as manager, trust me, you're doomed. You're doomed right from the onset. Why? Because every time you come up with something, they're going to underlook it. So, technically and tactically, Xabi Alonso was not wanting. He was building a team. Like I said, he inherited a team that had underperformed by measure of their own standards last season. But because he's a different crop of manager, with a different style, with a different view and philosophy, it was always bound to take time for him to get that team playing the way they wanted to play. And I remember saying this at the start of the season, that I had not been convinced with Real Madrid. They were winning game in, game out. When you go and look back to the first 11, 12 games of the Spanish La Liga season, they were winning games, but they were doing it unconvincingly. And I remember praising that to say that, look, given the circumstances of managing Real Madrid, it's good for a manager that results are coming as they work on the other aspects on improving their game or the club. So it worked in their favor. Then along the way, they had the slump in form where they drew 3 games, lost 2 games, and it felt a bit shaky. In the UEFA Champions League, where they sit seventh on the table standings with 12 points, having won 4 games and lost 2, I did not think, yes, of course, they would love to be higher on that Champions League table, but seventh is not the worst. And if they could win their remaining 2 fixtures, they are bound to finish within the top 8, which guarantees you a direct line to the round of 16 as you wait for teams that finish between 9th and 24th to play a playoff. So, and if you find yourselves only 4 points behind Barcelona in the Spanish La Liga standings, again, that's not the worst. It's not the biggest of margins that you cannot catch up with. We're talking about a Real Madrid team that beat up against Barcelona by 2-1 in the Clásico in the first leg at the Santiago Bernabéu. Who is to say that they cannot go to the Camp Nou and get a similar result? And certainly, if all other things were to align, they would reduce that deficit of 4 points to a mere 1. Is it to say that Barcelona are never going to drop any points for the remainder of the season? No, So 4 points behind Barcelona is not where you'd want to be, but it's not an ugly sin. It's not a point of no return, So if Florentino Perez wants a young manager, then he's going to have to deal with it. And then if you're a senior manager, because we know that rumors have been there for quite some time that they have in the past considered Jurgen Klopp. I've said this, Jurgen Klopp, wherever he's been, and particularly I made reference to Borussia Dortmund and Liverpool, he's been given the benefit of time to build the kind of team that he wants to work with. Now, a manager like Jurgen Klopp, his style is about aggression in the form of the counter press. He wants you to be relentless. He may fault you for anything, but not for effort in that counter press. That's how he had the successful Liverpool team that won it all there was to win. The UEFA Champions League in 2019, Premier League title in the subsequent year, could have possibly won 2 other Premier League titles had it not been for the extra brilliancy of Manchester City on 2 occasions winning the Premier League title by a point ahead of Liverpool. So if he is that crop of manager and that's his style, then trust me, Real Madrid is not a fit for him. Why? Because he's going to demand that Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Junior, Rodrigo Goes, Adagula, whichever it is, to do the same thing. Because while modern day managers are flexible and adapt to any situation, there are certain core principles about them or elements about their game that they're never going to give up on. And for Jurgen Klopp, the counter press is the holy grail of that, of his style. That gegenpress, that within the first 8 to 10 seconds of losing that ball, we must have recovered it, So I do not see Jurgen Klopp being a success at Real Madrid if that's his style in a group of players who may have the respect for him as a manager, but you do question whether they're going to toe the line when it comes to following his rules and his tactics, So he's one of the names. The other name that has been mentioned is Simone Inzaghi. Quite an experienced manager. Started enjoying watching him when he was at Lazio. I made the switch to Inter Milan, won the Scudetto, guided them to 2 UEFA Champions League finals. Unfortunately for them, they lost them. He's now at Al Hilal, where I think he replaced, was it George Jesus? Anyways, he's a good manager. The question is, would he be given the benefit of time? Because as I've said before, time is not something that you have in modern day football, but also, can he manage that dressing room? Once you get the Real Madrid job as head coach, your job is on the line right from the onset, So then the other names that have been mentioned, of course, every time something close to this happens or is expected to happen, is Zinedine Zidane. Like I said last night, his expectation is to take over the French national team at the end of the FIFA World Cup when Didier Deschamps chooses to step down. So there's that. So Zidane is possibly out of question. Names like Andoni Iraola have been mentioned as a young modern-day manager. Can he handle the Real Madrid pressure? I do not know. I do not think so. I'm not yet convinced so. Really, he's been fairly successful at FC Bournemouth. I do not see how he cracks the code at Real Madrid. You know, he could surprise me. He could blow me out of the water. He could prove me wrong. But if they've not had respect for a club legend like Xabi Alonso, a manager that walks in with pedigree, having won the Bundesliga title unbeaten with Bayer Leverkusen in 2024, then they're not going to give it to Andoni Iraola. You know, they're not going to do that. So those are some of the names that have been highlighted in regards to potential replacements for Jurgen Klopp. Of course, Alfonso Albiora is currently the head coach as an interim. Then Cesc Fabregas, a very highly regarded young manager at Como, guided Como in their debut campaign in the Italian Serie A to a 10th place finish. And as we speak, I think they are probably 6th on the Italian Serie A table standings. But one, Cesc Fabregas is a former Barcelona player. Would Real Madrid fans welcome a former Barcelona player to manage that team? I do not know. That remains to be seen. Two, is he capable of managing Real Madrid? At this stage, I'm not convinced. It's one thing to manage Como. It's another, totally a million miles away, another to managing Real Madrid. The circumstances, the expectations, the demands are miles apart. Miles apart. At Como is not expected to win silverware, at least not at this stage. Their objective is to get into European places, which they are fighting for. Real Madrid is about winning trophies, not fighting for places, not fighting to qualify for the UEFA Champions League by coming second or third or fourth on the La Liga standings, by being champions of La Liga. They want to dominate Europe. They want to win the UEFA Champions League as many times as they can afford to. They want to win the Copa del Rey. They want to win the Supercopa Hispana. So anything other than winning is always going to be footnotes to the conversation. So, out of those candidates, maybe Thomas Tuchel can be brought into the frame. Again, Thomas Tuchel, his style in terms of management is not much different from the likes of Jurgen Klopp, Xabi Alonso. His style of play could be different, but in the grand scheme of things, as a manager, when it comes to rules, structure, it's not different. And these players are opposed to structure. They are opposed to rules. So if you're Real Madrid, where do you look? Because as soon as I read that statement that Real Madrid and Xabi Alonso had part company or part ways on mutual consent, which I did not believe for 1 second that it was mutual consent. I believe, Florentino Perez had his say. My first thought was, who is going to take over at Real Madrid? Who is going to manage that role? And looking around, or quickly scanning through my head, I did not find so many plausible figures. But like I said, I'd say Jurgen Klopp, I'd say Simone Inzaghi, I'd say Thomas Tuchel. If you bring a Julian Nagelsmann, he's going to have the same fate that Xabi Alonso suffered. Do you go back to Carlo Ancelotti? I do not see that happening. Do you turn to Didier Deschamps? I do not see that happening. I'm not saying all of that can never happen. It's just difficult to imagine it. So, that's what is happening at Real Madrid. Anyways, moving away from Real Madrid, Manchester United, we know the pathways with Ruben Amorim, and the managerial post is vacant. Of course, Darren Fletcher having it as an interim. Now, in the next 12 to 24 hours, possibly 48, Manchester United are bound to announce Michael Carrick as their new interim manager until the end of the season. Now, This is after positive talks were held in the last couple of days, and he's okayed to all the terms and conditions of the contract presented by Manchester United. That's for Michael Carrick. Now, according to reports, it is being said that he would be hoping to bring Jonathan Woodgate as part of his coaching staff. He would also want to retain Darren Fletcher and have Johnny Evans. Johnny Evans, I think he's a loans manager at the academy of Manchester United. By loans, I mean players going out on loans and things like that, monitoring them, etc., etc. So he would want those as part of his backroom staff. Apparently, when Mark Rooney, former head coach at Derby County, would want the role to be part of the Michael Carrick's backroom staff at Manchester United. Now, I love the enthusiasm of former Manchester United players wanting to help their team out of the sort of snafu that they are in. I love that enthusiasm. But will it work out? Nothing suggests that it won't work out. But it's all short term. And the good thing about this is that Carrick walks in knowing he's an interim. And if he does well with Manchester United, it's not to imagine that he can never be given the job. But there's going to be a couple of clubs that won't be with that managers at the end of the season, or whose contracts run out. Marco Silva at Fulham, Andoni Iraola at Bournemouth, and Oliver Glasson at Crystal Palace. So unless anything changes between now and the end of the season, those clubs will have vacant roles and possibly could be in the market to search for their next gaffer. And maybe Michael Carrick does well with Man United and gets one of those roles, which then begs the question for Xabi Alonso, what next for him? Man United have a vacant role. Chelsea filled theirs. Liverpool may want to weigh their options at the end of the season. So you never know. Man United is there for the checking. Liverpool could be there for the checking, among others. So Enzo Maresca is out of a job. We know that Manchester City have scouted him as a possible replacement for Pep Guardiola. We do not know, but we constantly suspect that Pep Guardiola could hang his boots at the end of the current season to say 1 decade has been enough. So really, when you think about it, in that sense, if you're Manchester United, you must be thinking, I know they want a manager with a bit of Premier League experience, but like I said yesterday, for me, I put them in this order. Let me hope I can actually remember it. If I'm the one scouting a manager for Manchester United at the end of the season, and possibly after, would want to wait until the end of the World Cup, I'd go with Thomas Tuchel as number one. Thomas Tuchel would be number one on that list. Mauricio Pochettino would be in there. Enzo Maresca. In fact, I'll put Enzo Maresca second and Pochettino third. The one single player or manager that we did not talk about yesterday, or at least did not think of in the context of Manchester United, was Xavi Hernandez. But looking around, what some of the options are for Man United, those would be high on the list. These conversations of course, Oliver Glasner, Andoni Iraola, Kian McKenna, all those would come down the pecking order. The Marco Silvas, but for me, Thomas Tuchel is a guy to look at. The question with Manchester United is not different from the questions at Real Madrid. How much time can you be accommodated? From the look of things, at Man United, you are likely to be more accommodated a little bit more time than you'd be accommodated at Real Madrid. So, if for Man United, I'm thinking Thomas Tuchel is a first priority. 2, I'm thinking Enzo Maresca. 3, I'm thinking Mauricio Pochettino. 4, I'm thinking Xabi Alonso. Yes, he has no Premier League experience, but I'm definitely putting him higher than I would put Kian McKenna, higher than I would put Iraola or Oliver Glasner, you know? That's how I just look at it. So when Mark Rooney wants to be part of the backroom staff there at Manchester United, but let's see what the future will hold in terms of managerial filling of the gaps over those respective, vacancies for those teams. But possibly those are going to be conversations that rage on during the summer when those clubs, search for their managers. 2, you never know, there could be other gaps elsewhere. So anyways, then also quickly, yesterday we had the FA Cup. Fourth round draws are conducted with, and here they are. Liverpool will be up against Brighton. They will be at home at Anfield. How lucky Liverpool must feel for, playing back-to-back games in the FA Cup at home. Stoke City will be up against Fulham. Oxford will take on Sunderland at that stage. And then Wrexham will be up against Ipswich Town. Southampton will take on Leicester City. Arsenal will be at home against Wigan Athletic. Hull City will entertain Chelsea. Burton Albion will take on West Ham United. Burnley will take on Mansfield Town. Norwich City will be up against West Bromwich Albion. Port Vale will be up against Bristol City. Grimsby Town will be up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Aston Villa will take on Newcastle. Biggest game of the competition. Man City will have to wait who goes through between Salford City and Swindon Town. That game is to be played today. Macclesfield will be up against Brentford, while Leeds will play away to Birmingham City. Mega Prime Gamer says, wish it was Keane, but I'll take Rooney. Our team needs a real leader. Again, by the way, I was on this forum, and my suggestion for one was that let the interim managerial role, be given to the class of 92. And those are pandatory former Man United money of players. And I said, in no particular order, at least these 3 should be in it. Gary Neville, Roy Keane, and Paul Scholes. Those 3 were architects for me. They should be in there. Why? Because they are former club legends. I cannot sit here and pretend that I know about what goes on at Manchester United than they do. But I do suspect that while they may have access to certain levels of information regarding the club, they may not be in full grasp of the whole story. Why do former United soccer players think they are good at coaching? I don't know. Maybe some are fairly good at it. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is not too bad, even though he was sacked at Besiktas. But Scholes tried. I think he was with a certain small club done in the English, either League One or League Two, and it failed. Roy Keane managed Sunderland, and it did not work out. Gary Neville had a stint with Valencia. It never worked out. But for me, I would want that cohort to be handed the keys to United to say, have a go at it as interim. Maybe then, when they exit at the end of the season, having been there as interims, they'll come to appreciate the circumstances within which Man United managers operate. Because there's something oddly wrong about Man United. Ever since Sir Alex Ferguson's departure, they've had 10 managers or head coaches at different levels, permanent and interims. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I've never believed that all the appointments at Manchester United have been bad. But why is it that almost all of them have not been successful? Because by definition of success, for any of them would have been winning the Premier League title. Of course, Mourinho won the Cup double in 2017, the Europa League and the EFL Cup or the Carabao Cup. We know that Eric Ten Hag won an FA Cup and he won a Carabao Cup in his debut campaign. And he took, and then we know that twice they've been to the finals of the UEFA Europa League, 2025 and 2021. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer lost to Unai Emery's Villarreal. So they've had those moments. I do not think Jose Mourinho ever was a bad manager, but it's at Man United where he passed for a bad manager. Louis van Gaal, he tried to rebuild that team, give young players a chance. He had the continuity of David De Gea. He wanted them to play a certain way. For those of you that remember Chris Smalling, Phil Jones being in that backline, played so many back passes to David De Gea, Quintana, Marcus Rojo, Daley Blind, brought Marcus Rashford from the academy and he went on to be a Man United star. Had he won the Premier League, possibly we would be having legendary status. Brought in Anthony Martial. It never perfectly worked out well in the long run, but you thought he knew better. Maybe you could have gotten the best out of him. So I'm not one to believe that managers are entirely to blame for everything wrong that goes on at Man United and why they're not being successful. Ruben Amorim is simply the latest victim, He's the latest victim of that. And as he constantly said, he was trying to fix things off the pitch. First of all, he wondered why, if a player is given 2 days off or 3 days off, he'll be flying miles away back to an island or back to his country to visit people. You only have 3 days. Rest, want you back full. He wanted to manage that. So there's a lot of so many things he thought were systematic problems within the club. And he tried as much as he could to fix those and provide structure and control within the team. And he said eventually, once those got fixed, then the results would come on the pitch. Unfortunately for him, well, he may have been halfway into fixing all those backroom problems, results had never been elite. But at the time of his sacking, it was only 3 points, adrift of the top 4. So, again, not the worst of seasons. But anyways, for me, Man United, sometimes I feel every manager that walks in has to, in a way, directly or indirectly, deal with former Manchester United players who are never out of the media. And it's not to say that it's only Man United that have former players in the media. Arsenal have Ian Wright, they have Martin Keown, they have Ray Mason. Sorry, they have, Ray Mason. Ray Parlour has been in the media. David Seaman, every now and then. Thierry Henry. But when you look at how overall they cover Arsenal and how they speak about that team, you do not feel it's as toxic, for lack of a better word, as Man United former players speak about that team. You feel that those Arsenal former players bring a certain level of encouragement and hope for whoever is in charge. Fortunately for Arsenal, it's not been many faces since the departure of Arsene Wenger. It was simply Unai Emery, Freddie Ljungberg as an interim. Excuse me. And for the last 6 years, Mikel Arteta. So there's been a bit of consistency there, or some constants there. When you look at Aston Villa, they have Gabriel Agblonoha in the media, Jamie O'Hara for Spurs, others just feature. Look at Danny Murphy, formerly at Brighton, Ashley Young has been summoned to the media every now and then. Former Man United player, had a stint with Everton, had a stint in Inter Milan. But overall, these majority of these players do not. The way they speak about their former clubs is more encouraging than you'd often find those former United players speak about the club. And a part of them, and by extension, many the fans, and perhaps some of those in control, they cannot walk away from the Sir Alex Ferguson era. Not by forgetting it, but the more they make reference to it, the more it becomes harder for these managers, because it's never going to be the same as it was in the Sir Alex Ferguson era. No, it's not going to be. Fergie was a manager. He controlled so many things at the club. If he decided that you're David Beckham and we need to sell you, he sold you. It was his decision to make. You know, there was no backroom team interference, as we've had the cases at Chelsea under Enzo Maresca, you know, with apparently some technical people or people in the leadership ranks wanting certain players to be played to sort of regain their market value so that the club can sell them, contrary to what the manager wanted to do or go about his business. You know, so as I don't know if you've noticed, maybe because Arsene Wenger was not as successful as Sir Alex Ferguson was, but rarely do you hear constant references back to him. Look at Liverpool. It took them 30 years not to win the Premier League title, or without winning a league title. But for whatever conversation you will hear in Liverpool circles, rarely do you hear them making reference to the 30 years prior to them winning their first Premier League title. Go to Chelsea. They won the Premier League title as recent as yesterday in 2017 under Antonio Conte. They won 3 under Jose Mourinho in 2 different spells and with Carlo Ancelotti. But you do not constantly hear former Chelsea players hammering it in the media for whichever manager comes into the role to say, oh, that one is bad. He cannot be Jose Mourinho. He cannot be Carlo Ancelotti of 2009, 2010. He cannot be Antonio Conte of 2016, 2017, and things like that, you know? So really, I feel something ought to change in the way Man United go about those things. Anyways, away from that, Conor Gallagher has accepted a 5.5-year contract and is expected to undergo a medical today ahead of completing his €40 million move from Atletico de Madrid to join Tottenham Hotspur. Aston Villa had agreed a deal over a loan move for Conor Gallagher. They had agreed a deal in principle with, I think, an obligation to buy him in the summer. But Tottenham Hotspur came and solidified their long-term interest in the 25-year-old England international and blew them out of the water. So he's going to be he's destined for a move to Tottenham Hotspur. So that deal is happening. And then of course, we know that Manchester City have already signed Antoine Semenyo. They remain interested in signing McKay, although according to Fabrizio Romano, the plan for McKay is to stay at the club until the end of the season and move as a free agent. Bayern Munich are interested, Arsenal are interested, Man City are interested, Liverpool are interested. Who are the leading runners for his signature at the moment? Man City are leading the conversation. Not that they are in pole position to sign him. Liverpool, who tried to sign him in the summer, and that deal fell through on the deadline day, are in the front there. Mikel Arteta is believed to be a long-term admirer, and he and Andrea Berta have spoken to the players' camp. So let's wait and see where he will lead. If I'm McKay, I'm going to the German Bundesliga. I'm going to Bayern Munich. for as long as I can get guarantees from Vicente Company. Then Joao Cancelo arrived in Barcelona yesterday ahead of completing his loan move from Al Hilal, for which Barcelona will pay 4 million euros as loan fees. Then Timo Werner to San Jose is a here we go deal in place for the German striker to try a new chapter in the Major League Soccer. Werner leaves Leipzig and will sign at San Jose in the next days after verbal agreement reached today. That was according to Fabrizio Romano. So there's a good number of deals happening. Then Juventus, among many clubs, keen on signing Oscar Mingueza from Celta Vigo. So January transfer business is ongoing, but it's not as heavy as ordinary you'd have it in a January transfer window. Something feels off, a little bit off about this January transfer window for me. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much for having been part of this podcast. I want to say thank you so much, Africa Will Never Unite, Mega Premier Gamer, Barella. Wow, greetings, sir. Fazo Inter Milan. Okay, sorry I missed that comment. Rain Veins, thank you so much. And every single one of you that was tuned into the broadcast this beautiful morning, thank you so much for dedicating your time to follow the conversation. Keep watching, go to the video section, go to the live section, go to the short section and watch all that content and help continue to support this channel. Otherwise, stay blessed, and I will see you guys in the evening at 11 p.m. East African time when we go live once again. Bye-bye for now.